In the golden age of 1970s Hollywood, when the screams of thousands of young girls shook entire stadiums, David Cassidy, the star of the Partridge Family, seemed to have it all: fame, fortune, and the love of the world. But behind those bright lights lay a story never fully told, a fragile bond between him and Susan Day, the co-star who saw him not as an idol, but as a real man. They grew up together on set, shared their youth, and fell into a single moment that changed everything. One night, brief, awkward, and leaving behind a crack that would never heal. Years later, David would publicly call it a mistake, shocking the world, while the woman involved chose eternal silence. Why did a man loved by millions lose the only person who truly loved him? And why did one seemingly harmless night become a wound that followed them for life? This is a story not just about love, but about the price of fame and the loneliness that hides beneath the applause. When the dazzling stage lights of the Partridge Family came on, everything between them began as naturally as breathing. David Cassidy was just in his early 20s then, young, carefree, and radiating the charm of a rising star. Susan Day, the slender girl with clear, innocent eyes, had just turned 18, still carrying the shy grace of someone unaccustomed to the noise of the world outside. They met during long days on set, singing together, laughing together, living inside a make-believe family that somehow felt strangely real. Amid the chaos of the studio, Susan began to feel something deeper than simple camaraderie. She looked at David not just as a co-star, but as the center of her youth. He was polite, gentle, sometimes teasing in ways that made her blush. But what captivated Susan wasn't his fame or the lights that followed him. It was the quiet, thoughtful way he cared. Something rare in a world built on competition and pretense. David, on the other hand, never noticed the signs. To him, Susan was like a little sister who needed looking after. He spoke freely, telling her stories about concerts and adoring fans, unaware that each word brushed against her heart. Those around them soon noticed Susan's admiration, especially Shirley Jones, who played their mother on screen and was David's stepmother in real life. She saw the innocent longing in the young girl's eyes and knew it could only lead to heartbreak. Shirley gently advised Susan to keep her distance, but feelings aren't ruled by reason. The more time they spent together, the deeper Susan fell. She tried to hide it, to act as if nothing had changed, yet her eyes always found him during every scene. And David, surrounded by thousands of fans, remained blissfully unaware that right beside him stood someone who loved him quietly and sincerely. From that small misalignment, a story once pure began to take on the bittersweet taste of something impossible, the beginning of a tragedy neither could foresee. And like every Hollywood star, David eventually carried his fame beyond the set. But it was there, in that glittering world, that invisible threads of emotion began to weave through his private life, setting the stage for a series of dazzling yet fragile turns, where love, fame, and loneliness would forever blur their lines. The silence between them grew more pronounced after the show ended. No more long days on set, no more reasons to see each other regularly. Only one thing remained unspoken. Susan, barely out of her teenage years, carried the quiet ache of someone who had loved without ever being loved in return. David, meanwhile, lost in the whirlwind of tours and the intoxicating rush of fame, still felt a vague sense that there was something he hadn't truly faced. The wrap party for the Partridge Family became an excuse for one final meeting. No cameras, no characters, just two real people. David invited Susan to dinner, a friendly gesture, nothing more. But for her, It was the moment she had waited for all those years. After dinner, they drove to the old school David once attended, then to Rancho, California, his private escape from the noise of the world. There, in the stillness of the night, Susan let down her guard. She spoke of the years she had spent hiding her feelings behind a professional smile, of the quiet affection she had buried, and the fear that when the show ended, he would vanish from her life forever. David listened, confused, conflicted, and deeply moved. He truly cared for Susan, but only as a close friend. To reject her outright would mean breaking the heart of someone who had adored him, yet to respond would destroy the fragile, innocent bond that still remained between them. In that suspended moment, they chose silence, a kiss, then a brief night that passed between them, tender yet uncertain, intimate yet distant. By morning, there were no promises, no plans for tomorrow. Both understood that whatever had once connected them had fractured in the very instant they tried to hold it together. David felt empty, Susan wounded, and both knew that what had happened could never happen again. From then on, they would still meet at events, still smile for the cameras. But behind those smiles lay a distance that would never be bridged, the distance of a night that should never have been, yet somehow defined the rest of their lives. Years passed, and time dulled the wound, but never erased it. When the Partridge Family became just a nostalgic memory for fans, David and Susan went their separate ways. He pursued music and stage work, while she quietly chose a private life, far from Hollywood's noise. They were no longer close, yet neither ever spoke publicly about the other. Everything seemed to have settled, until David released his memoir, Come On, Get Happy, Fear and Loathing on the Partridge Family bus in 1994. In that book, David recounted every phase of his life, the drinking, the romances, the confusion of a man once adored by the world. But buried within hundreds of pages were a few lines that reopened an old wound like a knife drawn over a scar. He mentioned Susan Day, calling her his closest friend on set, the sister he never had. Yet he went on to reveal the details of the night they spent together, something Susan had never wanted to revisit. Worse still, he described it as an unremarkable, passionless experience, turning her into a subject of a cold and careless passage. For Susan, it wasn't just about exposure, it was betrayal. She had believed that even if everything between them had ended, there would at least remain a trace of respect. But now, it was all laid bare for the public to dissect. She didn't lash out, didn't respond to the press, didn't answer a single question. She simply withdrew. When VH1 reached out to invite her to appear in a documentary about the Partridge Family, Susan quietly declined. From that moment, she severed all ties with the old cast and never spoke of David again. As for David, he tried to make amends with a letter of apology, but there was no reply. Perhaps he understood that some mistakes can't be undone, especially when the wounded person chooses silence as protection. They never met again, never exchanged words of forgiveness. And when David died years later, no one knew whether Susan had ever opened that letter. From that moment on, the image of David Cassidy, the radiant idol adored by millions, began to crack. Behind the mask of fame was a man slowly losing everything: his reputation, his fortune, his family, and finally, himself. And perhaps the first price he paid for that long downfall was losing the only person who had ever truly loved him. After Susan Day withdrew from the public eye, David Cassidy continued down a path where the light of fame had already begun to fade. The words in his memoir, meant as a release, instead became a mirror reflecting who he truly was: a talented but lost man, forever seeking understanding while never knowing how to hold on to it. To understand why he ended up so alone and filled with regret, one must go back to the beginning, to a childhood that quietly shaped his lifelong wounds. He was born on April 12, 1950, in New York City, into a family that looked perfect on stage but was broken behind the curtain. His father, Jack Cassidy, was a celebrated Broadway actor, charming, magnetic, but volatile and deeply conflicted. His mother, Evelyn Ward, was a strong-willed actress who spent her youth following her husband from stage to stage. When David was only 6, the marriage ended quietly, leaving a void no one could fill. Tragedy followed tragedy. Soon after, Jack married Shirley Jones, who years later would play David's mother on The Partridge Family and become his stepmother in real life. For David, that blurred the lines between truth and illusion, between a real family and a scripted one. It was a confusion that haunted him all his life. That fractured childhood planted in him a desperate longing to be seen, loved, and acknowledged. A child raised amid applause and backstage silence, he learned early to hide loneliness behind a smile, a habit that would become his lifelong mask. As a teenager, David turned to music as an escape. He played guitar, practiced singing, and discovered that the sound of applause was the only thing that made him feel real. Yet deep down, he remained the boy who once stood in the wings, watching his father glow on stage, wondering if he'd ever earn that same proud look. That emotional void, one never truly filled, would later drive David toward every wrong turn, in love, in fame, and in his endless search for validation. At 18, David packed an old suitcase, a few clothes, and a dream too big for New Jersey. He left home for Los Angeles, the city where every light promised a chance, but could just as easily burn the weak. No mentors, no special treatment. Just a soft-spoken, good-looking young man willing to do anything for a few seconds on screen. His early Hollywood years were a blur of auditions and rejection. He lived in a small apartment, driving himself from studio to studio. He took bit parts, brief appearances in Bonanza, Ironside, and Marcus Welby, MD. Enough for viewers to remember a face, but not a name. Still, each step on set brought him closer to his dream. Not of fame, but of being recognized for who he was. What set David apart from the countless young men chasing stardom was his composure. He wasn't loud or reckless, but carried a strange mix of quiet confidence and the insecurity of someone afraid of being forgotten. That combination caught the eye of the producers of The Partridge Family, a face that could act, sing, and make people believe in his character. When David landed the role of Keith Partridge, he didn't realize it would change everything. He thought it was just another lighthearted TV musical. No one in the cast expected it to reshape American pop culture, but within months, it exploded. The songs from the show became hit singles. His name was everywhere. Hundreds of fans crowded outside every shoot. The once unknown actor became a national phenomenon. Yet with fame came loss. Casual hangouts turned into media events. Quiet nights into arenas filled with screaming fans. David felt adored, but not understood. He couldn't tell if people loved him or just the poster version of him. After every concert, when the lights went out and the arena emptied, the same loneliness crept back. The same feeling he'd known as a child, watching his father from the shadows. Success opened the door to glory, but also trapped him in its blinding glare. The brighter the spotlight, the darker the shadow behind it. And David, without realizing it, had begun a journey that would transform him from America's most beloved idol into the loneliest man within his own legend. In a short span of time, David Cassidy became a cultural phenomenon unlike anything America had seen since Elvis Presley. The Partridge Family wasn't just a TV show, it was a global craze. Songs like I Think I Love You echoed across radio stations, turning a 21-year-old into a national heartthrob and transforming every one of his concerts into a frenzy. Fans pushed through barricades, fainted, and police escorts were required just to get him through the crowd. Tens of thousands gathered at airports just to glimpse him step off a plane. David sold over 25 million albums, a staggering number for that era. The spotlight shone so brightly that he believed he had finally reached the pinnacle, loved, celebrated, validated. But behind that glow, David began to realize he was no longer a person. He was a product. Record labels and TV producers controlled everything: how he dressed, how he smiled, how he answered interviews. Every image had to fit the mold of the wholesome, boy-next-door teen idol. The songs he truly loved, the creative risks he wanted to take, all rejected as off-brand. While millions dreamed of being him, David felt himself slowly trapped inside a golden cage. In 1972, during a London concert, more than 800 fans fainted, and a 14-year-old girl died in a stampede. That tragedy marked an irreversible psychological turning point. From then on, David began to fear the stage. The lights overwhelmed him. The fans' screams became a burden. He realized he no longer controlled anything, not even his own emotions. When the Partridge Family ended in 1974, David tried to reinvent himself in more mature roles, appearing on Broadway and in serious television dramas. But audiences and Hollywood refused to let him evolve. To them, he would always be Keith Partridge, the wholesome boy with the charming smile. Every attempt to escape that image failed. His later albums sold poorly, his concert crowds dwindled. The success he once craved had become his shackle. Every cheer of his name filled him with both gratitude and dread. In one interview, he confessed that stage lights don't warm you, they burn you. It was the era of his greatest triumph and the beginning of his deepest isolation. From an adored idol, David Cassidy drifted into years where fame was no longer light, but a fire consuming what was left of his true self. When the cheers finally faded, he was forced to face a painful truth. Fame never lasts. After his golden peak in the early 1970s, he tried to shed the teen idol image, but Hollywood refused to see him as anything else. Directors still saw the long-haired boy with the bright smile and shining eyes, the eternal Keith Partridge. Each effort to prove himself left him more exhausted. No longer in demand, David tried to fill the emptiness with fleeting pleasures, short-lived romances, endless parties, drugs, and alcohol. He spent money as if glory would never end. He poured his fortune into risky ventures, horse farms, real estate, record labels, most of which failed. Lawsuits with former managers, mounting legal fees, and a lavish lifestyle soon drained his wealth. By 2015, David officially declared bankruptcy, his debts exceeding $10 million. His luxurious Florida home, the last symbol of his former grandeur, was auctioned off. He moved into a small apartment, living quietly, far from the stage. Once a millionaire idolized by the world, by the time he died in 2017, his remaining assets were valued at around $150,000, a heartbreakingly small sum for America's golden boy. From dazzling heights to devastating depths, David Cassidy's life became a brutal reminder that fame is never a promise. It is only a fleeting spark, and when it fades, all that remains is an echo disappearing into the void. After years of debt and defeat, David began to spiral into the darkest phase of his life. The stage, once his lifeline, the place where he found himself, had become his fear. Every performance brought not excitement, but exhaustion. Concert offers slowed, interviews dwindled. His name still appeared in headlines, but not for music, rather for incidents, missteps, and public breakdowns. From the beloved idol of a generation, David had become a fading symbol, a cautionary tale of what fame can take. Crushed by financial pressure, loneliness, and despair, he turned back to the one thing he had tried to leave behind: alcohol. At first, just a few drinks to calm sleepless nights, to forget unpaid bills. But soon it became a habit, and then a dependency. Alcohol helped him forget, but it also stripped away control. The voice that once moved millions grew raspy. His once confident steps turned unsteady. The media called him a star clinging to what's already gone through the haze of drink. An image both tragic and raw. From 2010 to 2014, David was arrested 3 times for driving under the influence and ordered into rehab by the court. Each mugshot made the front page. A gaunt face, hollow eyes, a forced smile that barely masked defeat. For fans who once idolized him, it was devastating. The man who had once made the world swoon now seemed broken by his own excess. As his health deteriorated, David tried to regain control of the narrative. He told the media he had been diagnosed with dementia, the same disease that had taken his mother and grandfather. The world mourned for him. Fans wept, believing their childhood hero was slipping into the darkness of fading memory. The image of David Cassidy, once the bright face of youth, became a symbol of human fragility in the face of time. But months after his death, an A&E documentary revealed a colder, more heartbreaking truth. David had fabricated the illness to hide his relapse into heavy drinking. In his final years, his body had been ravaged, his liver failing, his memory faltering, not from disease, but from decades of self-destruction. It wasn't true dementia. It was the price of a lifetime spent trying to forget himself through alcohol. And perhaps it wasn't merely a lie, but a desperate cry for help from a man who had once been loved too much, idolized too long, yet never learned to love himself. When fame abandoned him, alcohol was the only comfort he had left. But that false solace took everything from him: his voice, his health, his dignity, and, in the end, his life. Before everything completely collapsed, there was a time when David Cassidy genuinely tried to rebuild his life. After a string of short-lived relationships and heartbreaks, he met Kay Lenz, a beautiful, Emmy-winning actress, in the late 1970s, when he was still the idol of millions of young girls. She brought him a sense of peace he thought he'd been searching for. Someone who understood the business, shared the pressures of showbiz, and might help him escape the chaos of obsessive fame. They married in 1977, at the very height of David's career. The wedding made headlines across America. The teen idol had chosen a serious actress, not a fan. But behind the glossy covers lay a very different truth. Once the doors of marriage closed, David realized he wasn't truly ready for an ordinary life. He was still surrounded by managers, tours, contracts, and the constant gaze of the public. Kay wanted a home. David was still living inside the whirlwind of fame, a world with no space for stillness. The harder they tried to make it work, the further apart they grew. Endless tours, long nights, and 2 young people living in different rhythms eroded the relationship. By 1983, they divorced quietly. Kay later said, "David didn't know how to live a normal life." Perhaps she was right, because for David, normalcy had never really existed. After parting ways with Kay, David entered a lost period. No longer at the top, no longer with anyone by his side, he drifted from one fleeting affair to another, trying to fill the emptiness. And during one of those chapters, he met Meryl Tanz, a woman entirely different from anyone before her. strong, grounded, and uninterested in his faded fame. That meeting opened the next chapter of his life, one where love intertwined with his struggle to rebuild his image, but would once again end in loss and heartbreak. Merrill Tanz entered David Cassidy's life at a time when he was trying to piece together what had fallen apart. After divorcing Kay Lentz, he threw himself into work, seeking a new purpose beyond music. And that was when he discovered the world of horse racing, an elegant yet disciplined sport he hoped could mark a new beginning. Within that circle, he met Merrill, a South African trainer and stable owner, confident and pragmatic, utterly unlike any woman he had known. Merrill didn't see a fading star. She saw a man trying to find himself again. And David, after years surrounded by screaming fans, was drawn to her calm and maturity. They quickly became close, bonding over their shared love of horses and long afternoons in the fields, a place where he felt freer than he ever had on stage. In 1984, they married quietly. No spectacle, no headlines, just a simple promise of the peaceful life they both longed for. But peace was never something David Cassidy could hold on to. Even away from the spotlight, he hadn't learned how to slow down. Financial struggles, the lingering weight of fame, and his own insecurities made him increasingly withdrawn, irritable, and unpredictable. Merrill, though resilient, couldn't save him from his internal storms. Music still haunted him, a dream he couldn't let go of, while Merrill wanted a husband who could finally stop running and simply live. 2 years later, that marriage, too, ended quietly. In 1986, they divorced. No accusations, no public fights. Just two people who had shared a brief journey but were moving too fast in opposite directions. Merrill walked away, carrying the sadness of loving a man who could touch others' hearts but never hold on to his own. As for David, after 2 failed marriages, he carried the unhealed cracks with him. And then, as if by fate, when he thought there was nothing left to lose, he met Sue Schifrin, the final woman of his life, the one he believed could bring him the peace he'd been searching for after so many years of wandering. After 2 failed marriages, David Cassidy seemed to have stopped believing in love. He became more guarded, more withdrawn. And instead of seeking affection, he buried himself in work to avoid facing his loneliness. But fate wasn't done testing him, or perhaps it wanted to give him one last chance. During a studio session in the late 1980s, he met Sue Schifrin, a talented songwriter and producer. She wasn't loud or dazzled by fame. She entered David's life as gently as a melody, making him feel, for the first time in years, truly heard. Sue didn't see a fading idol. She saw a man struggling to find himself after too much loss. She helped him write music, reorganize his career, and more importantly, reminded him that he still had worth, not just as an artist, but as a person. They grew close, sharing long nights over the piano and unfinished demos, finding in each other what fame had never given them: understanding. In 1991, they married. It wasn't a lavish wedding, but it was sincere. That same year, they welcomed Bo Cassidy, David's only son, who would later follow in his father's musical footsteps. With Sue, David found what he had always longed for most: a real home. For many years, she was the anchor that kept him steady through financial and emotional turmoil. She was patient, compassionate, and always tried to keep him away from the temptations that had once destroyed him. But the essence of David, a man who had lived his whole life surrounded by applause and solitude, never truly changed. Alcohol insecurity and the ghosts of his past slowly crept back in. Though Sue stood by his side, he couldn't control himself. Each relapse, each time the police took him to rehab, she waited quietly behind the scenes, hoping this time would be different. But as the years went by, those hopes began to fade. By 2014, after David was arrested 3 times for driving under the influence, Sue realized that love alone could no longer save him. They separated and 2 years later, out in 2016, officially divorced. The marriage, lasting over 20 years, was the longest and most profound of his life. It ended not with anger or tears, but with quiet sorrow, the grief of 2 people too exhausted by love. Yet when David fell ill and was hospitalized at the end of 2017, Sue was there. She didn't come as a wife, but as an old friend, standing silently by his bedside, watching the man once adored by the world struggle for breath. Perhaps she understood that, after everything, he was still just a lost soul in need of forgiveness. And when David passed away, Sue said nothing more, only left a brief message. He brought music to the world. I just hope he's found peace now. That love, though it had ended, remained the most human part of David Cassidy's story. A quiet but profound chapter where a man who once lived for applause finally learned that the greatest gift isn't admiration, but a heart that chooses to stay, even in silence. In his final years, David Cassidy lived between 2 worlds, one where the lights of fame had long gone out, and another cloaked in illness and loneliness. After his divorce, he withdrew from the media and settled quietly in Florida, living in a small house far from the stages that had once made him an icon. His health deteriorated rapidly. His liver and kidneys were severely damaged after years of drinking. Fatigue and hospital visits became frequent, but David tried to hide it, afraid that people would pity him rather than remember him as the dazzling star he once was. He still accepted small tour performances, even though his voice had lost its strength. Many shows ended in disappointment. He forgot lyrics, missed cues, sometimes couldn't even stand steadily on stage. Yet what moved audiences wasn't perfection, but his effort. The sight of a man who once had everything, now clinging to music as his last refuge. Every time the spotlight came on, through the haze of age and alcohol, people could still glimpse the boyish charm of Keith Partridge, the young man who once made the whole world believe in love and music. By late 2017, after months of battling liver and kidney failure, David Cassidy was hospitalized in critical condition. His family, including his son, Bo, and ex-wife, Sue Schifrin, made it to his side. He passed away on November 21st, 2017, at the age of 67. Before closing his eyes, he reportedly whispered 4 final words: "So much wasted time." A simple farewell, yet filled with the sorrow of a life spent between applause and emptiness behind the curtain. Though his life ended in tragedy, David Cassidy's legacy remains unforgettable. He was one of the most influential television and music stars of the 1970s. The Partridge Family was more than a sitcom. It was a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of America's youthful optimism after the war. His song, "I Think I Love You," topped the Billboard charts, and millions of teenagers grew up idolizing the brown-haired boy with the radiant smile. More than half a century later, even as scandals and personal struggles have dimmed his reputation, his music endures, not for its perfection, but for its sincerity. In recent years, new generations have rediscovered the Partridge Family, rewatching old episodes and saying they can feel the purity in David's voice, something no one can fake. David Cassidy didn't leave behind a great fortune, just around $150,000. But he left something far more valuable: memory. A generation of Americans once loved him, grew up with him, and mourned for him. And perhaps somewhere, within the gentle melodies of Cherish or I Think I Love You, people can still see that boy, radiant, fragile, yet utterly genuine. David Cassidy's life was like a beautiful but broken melody, beginning with the bright notes of youth, then losing rhythm in the haze of fame, loneliness, and regret. From the young man who made the world swoon, he ended his days in quiet obscurity, with little wealth and a weary heart. Yet perhaps in that loss, people finally saw the truest essence of a star. Not the spotlight, but the person behind it. Vulnerable, flawed, yet still yearning to be loved and remembered. Today, when his old songs play again, people don't just remember Keith Partridge, the symbol of youthful innocence, but also David Cassidy, the man who dared to live, to fall, and to face himself. He once said he had wasted so much time, but for the millions of hearts he touched, that time was never wasted. It became memory, youth, and the sound of an era that will never return. If David Cassidy's story touched a memory in you of youth, fame, or mistakes that can never be undone, leave a comment below. What do you remember most about him? The smile of Keith Partridge or the weary eyes of a man at the end of his road? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so we can keep telling the true stories of those who once made the world stop and listen.